Welcome to the conclusion of The Mystery of the Silver Locket. In Part 3, Miss Bottles has disappeared, and the silver locket appeared on the Christmas tree with a new rhyme. 9 little schoolmates, seeing their fate, one heart was broken, then there were 8. When the students stopped accusing each other of making Bottles and Jameson disappear, a cryptic clue in a letter sent to Lily led the students to another cryptic clue. As Part 3 ended, one of the answers to the mystery is revealed to the audience. And now, all will be revealed. Moments later, Rory enters and crosses to the easel. Tess follows with Sissy and Annie behind her. Lily and Betty sit on the sofa looking back at the easel. Lucy is distressed and goes to the chair. Tess erases the previous clue and picks up chalk and begins to write. Okay, I hope I have this right. She writes, Miss Art C. Reimer. Rory reads out loud. It has 4 parts. Miss Art C. Reimer. Annie announces, well, Reimer makes sense all by itself. Tess thinking out loud. But Miss Artsy? Sissy exclaims, Artsy! Tess, without looking around, says, Charlie, you said you know what it means. She looks around. Charlie? Rory looks. Where's Charlie? Lucy looks up. Oh, he said he was going outside to get the sign. Tess stares at Lucy. He wasn't with us? Why didn't you say something? Lucy shakes her head. I don't know. I thought he stayed here. Rory steps forward. It's not Lucy's fault. None of us noticed he wasn't with us. Sissy addresses Rory. If something has happened to Charlie, wouldn't there be a rhyme in the locket? Annie turns to look at the Christmas tree. Rory pats her pocket. Don't worry. It's safe in my... It's not here. I don't understand. Annie crosses to the tree. Then what is that on the tree? Annie takes the locket and hands it to Tess. Tess opens the locket and removes the note. 8 little schoolmates, all's not forgiven. One got left behind, and then there were 7. Betty cries out, We left Charlie, Lily cuts in, behind. Lucy is mad. I've had it. I'm tired of being scared. We need to figure out who this Miss Art C. Reimer is. Tess turns to the chalkboard. Charlie said that he knew what it meant. Betty is confused. How could he know, Lily cuts in, but not us? Lucy asks, something in the school records? Tess studies the board. Wait, there is something familiar about the way these words are presented. Rory asks, like what? Tess shakes her head. The name is a red herring. We'd be wasting our time trying to figure out who this is. Rory disagrees. But it is clear that the words are telling us that the person behind all this is an artsy rhymer. Lucy adds, and very proud of the rhymes. Annie asks, but you said presented. What do you mean? Sissy concludes, it's a jumble. Tess agrees. That's right. It's a jumble. Lucy leans forward. A what? Tess explains. An anagram. You have a word or words that if you move the letters around spell another word or other words. It reminds me of Jumble, which is an anagram puzzle that is usually in the comics section of the newspaper. Sissy adds, my dad loves them. He always does one before I get to read the comics. He used to give me simple words to figure out. Lily asks, like, but Betty cuts in. What? Sissy says, dog. Lucy comes up with, God? Rory asks, so we switch around the letters and see the meaning. Lucy reading the board. Miss. Sism. Isms. Sims. Are those words? Sissy states, art is rat or tar. Rory adds, and C isn't a word. Tess explains further. We have to look and take all the letters and switch them around as a whole. We just don't know how many words it'll spell out. The best strategy is to stare and relax and see what words form. They all stare at the words on the easel. There's a long pause. Tess throws her hands into the air. I see it! Do you? Jameson enters from stage left stumbling and falls to the floor. A piece of paper is clutched in his hands. Tess rushes to Jameson and kneels down. Mr. Jameson! Jameson tries to talk. Too late. Take this. She's. He closes his eyes. Silence. Tess checks his pulse. Mr. Jameson! It's weak. Mr. Jameson! She drops his hand and backs up. She has the paper in her hand that he was holding. It's not beating. Lily and Betty are huddled together, shaking with fear, and ask, He's dead? Lucy adds, Jameson was saying she. Lily looks at Betty. Miss, Betty cuts in. Bottles? Tess crosses to the table, looking at the paper. Rory agrees. And then there were none. One of the early victims' death was faked and was behind all the other deaths. Annie looks at Tess. Could it be her? Tess looks at the paper. It's just the school's letterhead stationery. She places the paper on the table. Sissy looks at the paper. Tess looks at Rory. We need to get help. Lucy is adamant. No more sitting around figuring out puzzles and waiting to get picked off one at a time. We need to try to get to town. Lily and Betty together ask, how? Rory answers, Jameson's truck. Maybe he has the keys on him. Lily is looking at Jameson. Who's going to... Betty cuts in. Check. Sissy still looking at the paper. What does ARTESIAN spell? Rory turns. AR what? Sissy repeats. ARTESIAN. Rory replies, Artesian? Why? Sissy asks, well, what does it mean? Rory answers, something to do with water. I've seen it on bottled water. Tess looks at Sissy. Why are you asking? Sissy holds up the paper. It's on this paper at the bottom. Tess takes the paper. Oh my. It has the name of the headmistress. Artesian Catherine Bottles. Rory states, she shortened her name like I did. Miss Art C. Bottles. Tess agrees. Our Art C. rhymer. I was wrong about that. Rory remembers. That's why Charlie knew who was behind this. He works in the office, and he would have known her first name. Lucy says, then the name on the sign isn't a jumble? Tess says, the name on the sign is an anagram and solves the mystery. I'll rearrange the letters on the chalkboard and write the correct order below. Tess moves to the chalkboard. I forgot about it. At the board, she crosses out each letter and writes, Lucy is frustrated. I don't get it. Jameson sits up. Everyone backs away in shock. Miss Bottles enters. Merry Christmas. Lucy is shocked. It was all a fake? Rory sounds angry. How could you? Lily asks, it was a practical, Betty cuts in, joke? Bottles shakes her head. No, it wasn't a practical joke. Don't be mad. Let me explain. Tess confronts Miss Bottles. Are you serious? You make us believe that you're all dead, throw crazy puzzles at us, and making us believe that at some point the rhyme will end with, and then there were none? And Mr. Jameson died or he didn't die in front of us? I don't know about you, but as practical jokes go, what you've done is Annie and Sissy yell, awesome! Tess smiles. Took the word right out of my mouth. Rory smiles. I've been to a lot of schools. This one has to be the weirdest and coolest. Lily wonders, was that our Christmas? Betty cuts in, present. Bottles looks at Lucy. What about you, Lucy? Lucy struggles for the words. I'm relieved, but mad and confused. Why did you do this? Bottles begins. I'll explain and answer all of your questions. Every year during the Christmas break, all of you are alone and miserable. The names of the girls change, but it's always the same. You don't interact with each other, staying in your own little bubbles so you continue to behave with what is comfortable. Tess reads. She doesn't socialize much. Lily and Betty have each other and stay isolated. Lucy and her posse make the lives of students miserable during the year, and without them, she continues to do the same during the breaks. And then Annie and Sissy find themselves with older girls and naturally stick together. Rory is new, and based on her school records, doesn't make friends. Jameson adds, we wanted to give you a chance to break out of your self-imposed isolation and give you a reason to come together. Plus, we wanted to have an adventure and a memorable Christmas. Bottles interjects. We knew we wanted to get you to work as a team. How was the big question? Jameson continues. But when the snowstorm headed our way and cell towers went down, the idea of giving you a feeling of being isolated and on an island gave us a number of ideas. Bottles looks at Tess. And Tess reading, and then there were none, helped. Creating the mystery and the clues were surprisingly easy, but mostly we just let your imaginations fill in the blanks. Betty's eyes narrow. But what about Mr. Jameson? Lily cuts in. And you? Jameson smiles. We staged that for your benefit, Betty, right below your window. Bottles adds. And we made sure that Jameson's truck would be seen by you the next day. Jameson continues, you see, I had to have a good reason to leave and have a possible motive. So Miss Bottles and I made it appear that we were involved with each other and we were having a quarrel. Bottles adds, and the truck had to be seen the next day so that I would have a reason to suddenly run out so that I could be the second victim. Jameson concludes, the clues described what could have happened, not what really happened. Lucy remembers the night before. But what about the tree crashing through the window? Bottles admits, that wasn't planned. We almost called the whole thing off since Betty almost got hurt. Rory shows the locket. But the locket, how did it keep disappearing and how did the messages keep getting inside? Bottles smiles. A little inside help. Charlie. Charlie enters from stage left and stands next to Miss Bottles. Merry Christmas. Bottles puts her arm around Charlie. As you know, Charlie works in the administration office. What you don't know is that Charlie first started working for us 2 years ago under court-ordered community service. Jameson adds, Charlie is on probation. Lucy asks, probation for what? Charlie explains, my dad is a con man, and he would use me to help him with his scams. One day we got caught, and he ended up going to prison, and I was sent to juvenile court, which sentenced me to probation and community service, which is why I'm here. Bottles explained, we were hesitant to ask Charlie for help. He just asked that he not break any laws. The locket actually belongs to me, and I used my pass key to take it from your room. Rory asked, but how did you get the locket out of my pocket? Charlie smiles. One of the skills that my dad taught me was how to pick pockets. I got it when you stopped me from going after the sign. Tess looks at Jameson. Wait, how did you die? I mean, you had a pulse and then you didn't. Jameson puts his hand on Charlie's shoulder. I apologize for my death scene, but I just couldn't help myself, especially after Charlie taught me how to die. Charlie adds, like I said, my dad is a con man. It's a simple magic trick that Dad used to fake heart attacks at restaurants and then convince owners to give him money so he wouldn't sue them. Plus, get a free meal. I showed Mr. Jameson how to stop his pulse for a few seconds. Bottles looking at Lucy. Are you still mad at us? Lucy nods. Yes. But I learned some things about myself, like what a big chicken I am. I never really thought or cared how others felt when I was being a bully. Now I know how it feels to be scared and helpless. It felt the same as when my father left us. I mean, me. But when we all began listening to each other and working together, I started to feel different. Lily looking at Lucy. Are we really, Betty cuts in, annoying? Lily continues. Maybe we'll try harder not to finish each other's thoughts. Betty, pausing. Maybe. At least not out loud. Annie puts her arm around Sissy. I guess older girls aren't so bad. What do you think, Sissy? Sissy grins. Can we do another mystery? Bottle looks at Rory. What about you, Rory? Rory turns to Tess. My name is Aurora Firestone Custis. I'm rich beyond belief. Well, at least I will be when I turn 21. But now I'm truly rich because I have a best friend. She pauses. I hope. and I might actually stay here until I graduate. Tess looks at Rory. I guess that I don't have to escape into books to find a mystery. And anyone who likes Agatha Christie, Buffy, and Firefly, you do like Firefly. Rory's face lightens up. Big fan. Tess continues. Supernatural? Rory answers emphatically, yes! Tess and Rory hug. Then I'm good. The lights go out. Screams. Bottles turns to Jameson. What happened to the lights? Jameson replies, well, I guess we're out of gas.